maybe even a little too loud. We'll see how this goes here. Our new audio system, we're still struggling there to work out some of the kinks and to get the volume right. So again, we'll see how that goes. Great to see everyone here this morning. I want to welcome everyone here to the Chico History Museum. It's just great to see this community support for our museum here and for our stories from the past that come right down into the present today. I want to just mention that next week we've got another great program by, oh no.
A senior moment.
Yes, there we go. There's Mike Bagliari, and this is, oh, I can't dredge it up, and it will come to me in a minute. And he is a professor at Chico State in the history department, and he will be in here next week to tell us about Rod Thompson. Yes, Rod Thompson, a very fine person there, past president there with Chico Heritage, and a Chico guy himself who really ended up at Chico State. A good story there. And he'll be in to tell us about the Ku Klux Klan in Butte County. This really is from Rod's article in the Butte County Historical Society Diggins magazine here over the last year. I think that was printed. A very interesting story about how Butte County back in the 1920s and 30s had somewhat of an active bunch of Ku Klux Klan groups, although they kept very much to themselves and were not very social, didn't come out too much into the public. Again, it'll be a good program from Rod, and thank you, Liz, for getting me straightened out on that. Again, I think we'll go ahead and just move toward our program today. Again, I was fortunate yesterday to see a little bit of Michael Brown's program here that he's ready to present. Some great pictures. And of course, this story of the electric railway system that went from Chico down to the Bay Area always has been an interesting one to me, because I can remember my dad and my grandmother both talking about when, during the 1930s, a long time ago, when they wanted to go to the Bay Area, they would take the Sacramento Northern, and they'd talk about these different stopping places along the way, these names of little spots out there on the run down to the Bay Area where the train would stop. And then once you got to the Bay Area, what it was like to get across the bay. So again, a great story. And to me, this story of an electric train system as compared to our more prominent gasoline-powered vehicles that we use, cars, trains. Again, an interesting and absorbing one about how early on we did have this electric system in place and how it faded away in time. They're leaving us with fossil fuels really to drive our transportation system over the last 75 years, since really the end of World War II. So again, I'm going to turn this over to Michael Brown, and again, it was great yesterday to feel from him a passion for this story. He has been at it since boyhood about trains, electric trains, and right here in Butte County and in Northern California, again, decades of looking at this train system that used to be here, walking it. And so, Michael Brown.
Testing. All right, hello everybody. So thank you for a very, very kind introduction. And no, I'm indeed no professor. This is a labor of love, and we'll just take it from that basis. I want to tell you also that like a steam engine, I run hot. So you're going to see me sweating all through this. It doesn't matter if there's air conditioning or not, that's just how I am. So be advised. All right, so let's go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get right to it. I'm here to tell a story, or stories, or the best stories, about an extraordinary railroad which not only ran through Butte County, but that started from and existed because of Chico. It was built, privately financed, let's see if hopefully this rhythm, there we go, that's in rhythm, electric railway powered entirely by hydroelectricity. It started in 1906 with big celebrations here and Oroville, later Gridley, Live Oak, Yuba City, and Marysville, down the line all the way to Sacramento, with branches to our Hamilton City, Woodland, Colusa, elsewhere. The plans were colossal. They're transformative. This is a picture of the network at its full maturity, and just to be clear, this part here would come later. This is the part we're going to be talking about, and this doesn't even show the full scope of the plans. Those are pretty exciting. It wasn't just for our city or county, but the entire Sacramento Valley. It did compete with the big coal-powered rail companies. In its early days, it received some hard economic knocks, but it soldiered on, and it hit bankruptcy. It made it through that. It eventually became the mighty Sacramento Northern, our country's longest electric interurban main line. Some say the longest in the world. Still got to check that one out. It did run electric freight and gourmet dining car electric passenger service from Chico through Sacramento, first to the Oakland Mole, then direct into San Francisco at the end. The interurban age fading, the automobile age in force, long-distance passenger service finally ended on Halloween Day in 1941. Local Chico trolley service lasted through 1947. Electric freight ended in 1965. Oops, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Sorry about that. With this, I am a neophyte. Oh. Sorry, I'm in trouble here. Is anyone a PowerPoint guru? Okay, it seems like it's okay. It seems like it's still okay. There we go. Thanks. Hopefully that will be the last of it. All right. So that has to do with the bankruptcy. That's a bridge that they went and built right around the time they're going bankrupt. They were just continuing on with the plan. Okay. So local trolley service here in Chico lasted through 1947. Electric freight service ended in 1965.
I can't hear you back here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi. So things are, there we go. Now we're caught up. The electric supply and later the tracks were taken up, and it all fell quiet. Or so we thought, but we'll save that for later. So here we are at the Chico History Museum, and thank you Dave and Debbie and Flory for having me. All good?
Did you get the mic for the?
No, I didn't put on the portable.
Okay, it's for the camera and for recording.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Okay, never mind, I'll find it.
It's here. Here.
Aha.
You're
So
seeing it live as it happens.
this is just what we do, you know,
Sure.
just trying to be
The recording's good.
efficient.
Got it.
Wherever you want to put this in your pocket, just great. I am sorry, forgive me, thank you.
No worries. Okay. All right. So anyway, thank you for having me. So history is all around us, and that word history comes from Proto-Indo-European, vittor, to see, to know. In the late ancient Greek, it's tied to idea and vision in the sense of something visionary. History. So for the sense of it we're seeking today, let's visit Europe at the time our railroad was running, to the writing room of D.H. Lawrence, the British author. One of his characters feels on the outside of history. They're bored. Until one day, unaccountably, they feel the blood beating in the arteries of a long dead person. The divide of time is a bit bridged. Does it sound better? Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So there will be a later day to tell all about the system's use of the uncovered Good enough. 600 volt third rail versus higher voltage catenary wire overhead, and the complex business whereby branches like the Calusa branch were built by, on paper, independent corporations and bought by the Northern Electric. But our focus today is more toward the kind of history whereby Lawrence's characters suddenly knew the past. We're going to look at the big picture and the big land that brought this railroad into being, sustained it, and led to its, in time, passing away. What were they feeling, these people? That's a pretty good feeling. Who were they? What were their thoughts? We should get to know, again, the people involved. The planners, the employees, the riders, the bankruptcy administrator, one of my personal heroes, and others. What they wanted to do, the stories at the centers of their times, and what remains of all they did. As to me and why I stand up in front of you, I have to confess that Chico and Thermalito, let's see what comes up today. Oh, that's exciting. It's going to be a little bit postmodern. You know, the talk and the images are going to be a little bit disconnected. So anyway, these places like Chico and Thermalito and Gridley, and well, all the way almost down to Sacramento, roughly paralleling 99 and then cutting over towards 70 at Marysville, have been haunted the past several years by a figure walking down cow pastures, peering at bridge undersides on bike trails, splashing up streams through blackberry growth, pointing his camera into big old warehouses, taking pictures of concrete structures in forests and riverbanks. Let's see what comes up now. There you go, there's the guys. Okay. That crossed River Road, by the way. That was the Hamilton branch. So I looked at peculiar alignments of dry grass and rocks and trees and picked up stuff like that. It's like hundreds of pictures in the 90 miles or so down to Sacramento. And I learned that Butte, Yuba, and Sutter counties, and some other ones, are full of physical remains of one of the most interesting electric railroads ever. The traces of history are all around us. So that's going to be part of it today. This is a bond from the Northern Electric Railway Company, actual original one, and this will play an important part in the story. So what remains right now generally in a long, narrow corridor down to Sac, with offshoots to Oroville and Calusa and Woodland and all that, is a fascinating story. There's that thing. There you go. Look. Someone thought Woodland's Northern Electric Station so good that after it became decrepit and damaged, they rebuilt it in 1986 from the original plans. It was by mentioning the many physical remnants that first piqued Dave's interest, and together we set the overall direction of the telling of this particular part of Chico and Butte County and Northern California history. He and the museum have left the rest to me, so the buck stops here. So one postscript Dave or I couldn't have known when we first talked was that the Northern Electric story taking a fascinating turn toward life again in the next few years. We'll talk about that too. With all that said, before we get to Diamond Match and the old Butte County Railroad, our story begins 20 million years ago. Extensive volcanic activity, right, lays the literal foundation of our valley and the Sierra Nevadas. About 10 million years ago, our geological plate thinned out kind of by bottom heating, by pre-existing plates, begins to tilt down in the west and up in the east. Right? The Sierras rear up thousands of feet into cooler, thinner air. 2.5 million years ago, glaciers push down and excavate our beloved valleys. And so the setup is complete. Moist sea air comes in past the coastal range, too short to intercept it, and passes high over the valley. It hits the slopes of the Sierra Nevada and Cascade Ranges east of the foothills. It deposits enormous amounts of snow and torrential rains. Water runs down, and in the foothills, almost to the peaks, quietly grow vast forests in the almost perfect conditions. There's some forests. So there's the setting. Now for the parents, somewhat literally, a match company and an electric company. In 1902, Diamond Match built its Sterling City lumber mill, fed by logging railroads, snaking all around the hills. To get wood down to Diamond's vast plant Chico Works, and it was then known as Barbertown, that was named for Diamond's president, O.C. Barber, construction of the Butte County Railroad started in 1903. Steam engine passenger and freight service was running between Sterling City and Chico by spring 1904. Fast work. The power company, the same Sierra Nevada volcanism and tectonic tilt was behind that. A flamboyant Panamanian-born, American-raised entrepreneur named Eugene DeSable, with another investor, started a venture in 1889 in Nevada County to develop mines and light towns and cities with electric lights, from the corporation papers. They failed, but they kept at it, seeing electricity as the future. And with the addition of DeSable's fellow Yuba River gold miner, John Martin, and an heir to the Colgate fortune, they opened a hydroelectric plant near Nevada City in February 1896. That wasn't California's first, but it was within 2 or 3 years of a pioneering installation in San Bernardino County. So DeSable and Martin saw that reliable electric service, there's his dam there in their house, required networks. And before long, the little Nevada County Electric Power Company became the Bay Cities Power Company, which became the California Electric Company, which became the California Gas and Electric Company, which became, in fall 1905, the Pacific Gas and Electric Company. I will abstain from present-day comment. No PG employees intended to offend here. With this and all around it, some of the world's richest farmland in the alluvial plains of our Sacramento Valley, the Diamond Match Factory went to a well-known several decades career in the setting of a somewhat utopian corporate town. Diamond Match not only had a large tract with, ahead of its time, social facilities for workers, they built workers' houses in Chico. To get employees between factory, home, and downtown, they built a street trolley, which opened on New Year's Day 1905 and was powered and operated from the Diamond property. We might mention that one of the investors in the Chico Electric Railway was Eugene DeSable. Sometime between that New Year's and a late spring day that year in a mansion in Piedmont in the Oakland Hills, a man had an idea. And this is the first of the striking personalities that we'll meet. Henry Augustus Butters. He was born in 1850 on the East Coast. He came to California as a young teen. He had early jobs in publishing and life insurance. Then in 1878, he went to the booming silver town of Leadville, Colorado. With its needs for lighting, venting, water pumping, and the ever-present moving of heavy loads out of the earth and on their way to smelters, which quickly became electric too, there was a natural connection between mining, electricity, and railroads the world over. Butters' success in Colorado was such that by 1890, he was working alongside Cecil Rhodes, British mining entrepreneur, founder of Rhodesia, railway visionary, and Butters built the first electric streetcar system. Let's take a look at Cecil. First electric streetcar system in Cape Town, South Africa. That done, his mature life course was set. He was wealthy, he was living in fine houses and hotels. That's one of the ones he actually stayed at. He got kidnapped in South Africa for a very heavy ransom. And in the 1890s, he built the inaugural electric tramways in cities in Switzerland, Portugal, England, Chile, and kind of completing the circle toward home, he bought for $12 million back then the Mexico City electric tram system. Do I have something there? He looked into purchasing the vast Los Angeles Railway yellow car railway, but he wound up looking northward. He'd married a California lady in 1891, adopting her several children, including a young man who would show an engineering talent. And then he moved into a palace of a home in Piedmont over the East Bay. He bought a vast rural spread in Susanville, Lassen County. He won a horse racing blue ribbon and Burlingame on the peninsula, and he looked for the next great thing. Perhaps it was on a journey to their Susanville property, La Constancia. We don't know. But the experienced eye of Henry Butters landed on Chico. That's La Constancia. And there's Chico. So it was amid, obviously, the fertile grounds of the vast valley. It was then largely undeveloped in a modern sense. With dirt roads on the one hand and the much hated Southern Pacific. There they are. Some things never change. On the other, to move a growing volume of agricultural produce to Sacramento for shipment downriver, even to the Oakland wharves, he had an idea. America was in the depths of the interurban age. Midwest agricultural states in particular saw a huge growth in trackage. By 1900, the country had more than 2,100 miles, mostly Midwest and California. Jumping ahead to its crest, by 1915, there would be 15,500 miles of track in the United States. And 10 years later, Indianapolis's interurban terminal would schedule 500 electric trains in and out daily. They carried 7 million passengers per year. Electric and urban railroading would, at its height, be our country's 5th largest industry. But in 1904 or 05, a couple of decades before, it took a visionary eye to look at the dusty valley roads and steam railroad with rates everyone complained about, and envision. But that was Henry Butters' stock in trade. With fellow investors, he incorporated the Northern Electric Company in Nevada. Note the company name at this point doesn't give away a railway intent. We can trace boards of directors and other corporate features at a later time, but suffice to say that some names by 1906 at beginning, E.R. Lilienthal, Louis Schloss, again Eugene de Sable, we will meet again. The active investors, Henry Augustus Butters, first among them, put their own cash up for the project, such that construction began in Oroville in October 1905. The Diamond Match Trolley, formerly the Chico Electric Railway, was acquired in late 1905. By late 1906, rails on the Oroville line made it to the Northern Electric's own new covered bridge. Let me just pause for a moment. This is one of the most interesting structures I've ever seen, and I assure you this is really what it looked like. So there's something out of a surrealist movie, you know? But it was a covered bridge and it made sense, and you can see there was kind of an immensely long trestle over at the other, over at the other end, and we're looking toward Oroville here from the Thermalito shore. So that's over the Feather River, and that's what is now Riverbend Park over in Oroville. In March 1906, 250 acres in Chico at Park and 20th were bought for the headquarters, repair and storage yards, and train movement control center, all known as Mulberry. 250 acres. Construction was so rapid that on April 11th, 1906, 6 months after work's beginning, Mr. Butters and other officials boarded a fine interurban passenger car with strong motors in its wheels, built by the leading manufacturer of the time, Niles Car and Manufacturing Company of Ohio, and were able in electric high-speed comfort to ride the, that's what used to be there, 24.7 rail miles from downtown Chico to downtown Oroville. It's worth noting that before this, the two towns had been connected by stagecoach and hired rig. Now, a word about what they'd built. The interurban age was full of tales of lines built hastily to take advantage of the wave, to attract or sell to investors as a main interest, with operation as an afterthought. From my research, particularly walking the line in recent years and inspecting what's still there, the Northern Electric was no part of this trend. To begin with, this was a privately financed venture. Henry Butters and others put up their money and their names. There was no government financing. There was a bank loan later to complete the line after personal investments had been made, and later on a bond offering to expand. Too much debt in the end. But they built with a large component of personal cash. They built to steam railroad standards. Now that's a term of art, meaning outside of cities, a spacious right-of-way, like you see there, generally 80 to 100 feet wide. And each foot of that had to be obtained from private owners. And with barbed wire security fencing, you can see there too, along the route, except at crossings, a relatively level roadbed thanks to expansive cuts and fills and bridges, which saved money long-term by eliminating steep electricity costing climbs, and comprehensive water handling infrastructure, a surprising amount of which still exists and operates to this day, which I'll proudly show off to you later. I have no doubt that Butters and his associates intended to make money, lots of it from this ventures, by means of building a large railroad network that would pay for itself by bringing prosperity and ease to the entire Sacramento Valley. Now about the route this infrastructure built rapidly and well took. We start at the great Chico Terminal at 1st and Main, and I dearly wish that this still existed. We run down Park past the offices and car barns. It's kind of what we'd see passing by. And the maintenance shops at Mulberry, employing, by the way, dozens of Chicoans for decades. Then out onto a private right-of-way into the orchards and farms along what we now call Midway, through long sections of country running out to the station at Durham, best available picture. After some more orchard miles, the right-of-way goes southish into what's now rice fields, and as we cross into Thermalito in the Campbell Hills vicinity, cattle pasture. Those two long right-of-way views that you've seen, that's actually Thermalito. That's actually what was right there. Those are not generic. All these pictures are Northern Electric specifically. It's almost inconceivable that it was possible to build high-speed electric rail in a handful of months, but that was the difference between then and now. So now we reach a quite unusual structure in the middle of what was then nowhere out there in Thermalito, so nowhere that the railway gave it its name, Tres Vías. A few years later, the Great Pennsylvania Railroad would build something akin in the deserted New Jersey Meadowlands, Manhattan Transfer. Yes, like the music group, they took the name. At those long platforms, steam engines were changed out for electric locomotives to continue under the Hudson River to Manhattan. Passengers could disembark for the area electric train service. Well, we had our own, a Tres Vías, and we had it first. So did you see back there the station with a little garden and the tiny new decorative palms? I have to tell you, I don't know if we've got a picture coming up on that, but those palms are still there. All these years later, and they're somehow hanging on. They're not watered, they're not taken care of, they're part of Lambert Ranch, but those palms are still got green leaves to them. Make of that what you will. Right? So our ride takes us through the olive and citrus groves of Thermalito. We slow and stop at the lovely, there it is, Thermalito Station. And it's got stained glass, it's got a fireplace and tile. We then go through a long, deep cut to that very interesting bridge over the river. And we then go down into Oroville to downtown station. That's opening day. In Oroville, the route goes into a loop. The car is facing Chico-ward again, and we can return home after our business in the county seat is done. That mid-April 1906 inspection trip with Mr. Butters and others checked out because despite the terrible San Francisco earthquake of April 18th, a grand opening day, there's Chico, was held on April 25th, 1906. So let's take a moment. Chico and Oroville, again, the seat for jury service and business with the county, and shortly a stop on the Western Pacific's Great Feather River project, had previously been reachable by, stagecoach, hired rig, your horse, or your own feet. Suddenly, we're on steel rails on a well-graded, largely level route in cars capable of going 60 miles an hour on those rural flats you just saw. 60 miles an hour for a lot of the route. That's an enormous advance. There it is. Henry Butters was typically all in, and shortly the Chico Weekly Enterprise noted that the worldly empire builder had bought an expansive home, Los Nogales, in Chico, just outside of city limits. He didn't give up his Piedmont house, but he bought one here too. And there's very little about this property, it bears further research. But by that year, he was entertaining investors and others in Chico, having Bay Area people right and left come up, including PG&E's John Martin. And for his part, also, Butters' adopted son, J. Paulding Edwards, who'd become the railroad's electrical and mechanical engineer in fall 1911, bought one of the villa lots along Big Chico Creek from the Annie E.K. Bidwell Land Company. Edwards would, for years after, list Los Nogales and Chico, whatever it was, as one of his 2 home addresses in a Bay Area high society contacts book. So, cars began to fly between Chico and Oroville. That's as best as we can figure out Oroville. There may be the opening day. On rails and ties and ballast and embankments and cuts and fills and bridges, all built to steam standards, powered by hydroelectricity from our hills. At Tres Vías, though, I'll see that again. There'd been from the beginning a switch at the end after the Oroville line. That's that one. Oroville's that way. Here's the main line. That's kind of an ugly picture. Here's the main line coming down, and it would just kind of continue south there, and you just, at that point, stopped. Continued the main line's great southward run past the Campbell Hills and down this third way. A great deal of work began between Tres Vías and Sacramento, such that on July 20th, 1907, the first car from the capital arrived in Marysville. As electrical supply was still being put in, a steam locomotive did the honors. So the Northern Electric, and a theme we will see again, became a hybrid electric and steam passenger railroad. September 7, 1907, 2 years and 2 months from incorporation date, an electrified mainline railroad built to high standards, powered entirely by purchased Sierra Nevada dam juice, from Chico to Sacramento was celebrated as complete. But even this, 90.5 miles of mainline rail, wasn't the end for Chico. In late October of that year, we will see this bridge again, opened with service from Chico to J.B. Hamilton's sugar beet factory, then north to the popular Shotover Inn in the company town of Hamilton. That River Road bridge, built on pontoons, was where the line crossed the Sacramento River. See our guys there? So not only was Chico the northern terminus of a substantial line with a beautiful station, not only did we have a huge rail yard, maintenance shops, headquarters, Chico has an almost totally forgotten history that we built locomotives. With the Northern Electric, we have an unappreciated career as a place of the heaviest industry, including one of the most interesting electric units I've ever known. I have known a few. To open these stories, we're going to have to meet a person worthy of the line in cars and engines that he built, Henry Butters' adoptive son, J. Paulding Edwards. J was Joseph, but he went by the initial. He'd studied engineering at the University of California, and his employment by the railroad was no family favorite. After college, he'd served an apprenticeship with the apparently mandatory stint in mining. That certainly demands competence and realism. And afterward joined his dad in Mexico City, doing complex electrical work on the tramway venture. By the time it was time for the Northern Electric, he'd had the experience and, from all we can see, the drive. A newspaper would later say that Edwards best liked speed, speed, and speed. And as a future fellow of the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, he had the technical ability to make speed efficient and safe. To him was handed the enormous assignment of designing, which of course also meant overseeing design and execution, of the entire Northern Electric system. As far as Chico as a city, I must call us a city now, of railroad and locomotive building, after the nice streetcars of the Chico Electric, the Northern Electric's first order of business was fast interurban passenger cars, and again, they went to the best in buying from Niles. There's a little Niles propaganda. We must understand that each car had electric motors at each axle and could be operated independently. Current was drawn from a supply in the right-of-way, trolley wire, up top in towns and cities for safety, and then in rural areas from a wide exposed third rail, every third wooden tie long, and it was energized at 600 volts and heavy amperage. Each car controlled by a classic motorman up front and able to couple with other cars and be run as a multiple unit train by that same motorman. So after making Niles richer, J. Paulding Edwards and the electrical and mechanical departments in Chico decided to do it themselves. They home-built motorized cars, inspired, shall we say, by the top-notch products that Niles had provided. There's our guys. And that's actually what they're doing. They're building a, shall we say, reverse-engineered copy with improvements of a Niles car there. It's being built in Chico. They were, by the way, really beautiful. They had fine woods, all kinds of different woods, not all of them just from Diamond Match, and stained glass and the works. And they kept going from 1906 to the late 1930s. Again, very well made. So the Northern Electric was by no means a passenger-only freight operation. And in years to come, those in the know would breathe a quick thank goodness that the rail and ballast and bridges were built for freight service too. Other interurbans were not planned so well, and the lack of provision for freight work would contribute to a number of lifespans shorter than our railroad here. That's on purpose. We now come to something that I want Chico to own in its historical memory and never let go, because it is as forgotten as it is intriguing to the rail fan as it is to their and our credit. It's really one of the main reasons I had for coming to you today. So I want to present the Northern Electric's fully Chico-built, one-of-a-kind electric locomotive, the 1010, known by the guys who built it and ran it as the Beast. It was designed by Paulding Edwards here. It was built from the wheels up using the finest Westinghouse and General Electric parts, ordered and delivered by Chicoans here in Chico. And I think it's kind of beautiful. It was said of Henry Butters that he was somewhat of a showman, and that was true too of his adoptive son. When the Beast took to the rails here for tests in March 1911, the Northern Electric was as well. Coming on a story about this locomotive while checking old newspapers about the NE convinced me that there was something extraordinary about this railroad, because we read in the Marysville Appeal in late March 1911, the Mulberry Shop boys were building what was probably the largest electric locomotive in the world. Now, it wasn't. As a loyal fan of the Northern Electric and a lover of Chico, I sympathize. It would be awesome if it were true. I love their ambition, and showmanship is good sometimes. There was no internet then. They might have believed it. And the story doesn't end there. So for a minute, we're going to look into details gnarled enough to make the wonkiest rail fan happy. Anyone's out there is a real rail fan, this part's for you. It's not as an end in themselves, though. It's to get a bead on what Mr. Edwards and the Mulberry Shopmen intended and what they accomplished with that. Okay, so first to take down the exaggerations. The literature on early years of United States Railroad electrification alone, leaving aside that in Europe, shows that the 1010, at the time of its unveiling, at 53 feet was not the largest in the United States, understood as longest. That's pretty. The Pennsylvania Railroad home-built dozens of electric DD1 models starting in 1909 at almost 65 feet long. At 82 tons, not the largest in the United States, understood as heaviest. The New York, New Haven, and Hartford EP1s, delivered by Baldwin Westinghouse starting in 1905, they were 93 tons. Okay? At 870 horsepower with forced air blowers on, the 1010 was not the most powerful. The Pennsylvania engine you just saw had 1,580 horses, and the New Haven had 1,420. Okay? At top passenger timetable of 60 miles an hour, no evidence it was fastest. The New Haven topped out at 80 miles an hour, and the Pennsy at 85. So in the western United States, there were American Locomotive Company units built for the Great Northern Railway in 1909 to haul trains with steam locomotives attached through Washington State's Cascade Tunnel to end intolerable heat and fumes. At 104 tons and 1,500 horsepower, they had an operating speed of a bit under 16 miles an hour. So the last, and apparently the most directly comparable, there you go, there's a Great Northern. Western U.S. electric locomotive was the rather a lightly documented suite of Spokane and Inland Empire Railroad engines. 100 tons, 1,200 horsepower, built by Westinghouse, which ran on the flats from Spokane out through the Palouse grasslands to Coeur d'Alene and Moscow, Idaho, delivered in 1906. So these, as far as I could tell from research in U.S. heavy iron and electric and urban history, were the only peers to the beast when it was inaugurated. So it wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the heaviest, it wasn't the fastest or most powerful or the longest. The 1010 was not a world or nation or region record holder when it comes to single bare numbers. What was it, aside from the excellence of it having been built in Chico, there at Park and 20th? Well, I have found that it was, in its complete set of attributes, extraordinary. And in my review of the literature, certainly in the United States, possibly the world, innovative in a couple of very special ways. First off, looking again solely at the US, only the Pennsylvania and the Northern Electric dared build electric locomotives in their own shops. That was usually the prerogative of the biggest roads with very big cash flow pockets who could afford experiments. But the NE was up for an experiment. Next, all those were of the kind of the square box cab type with cabs and controls in both ends. Only the New Haven and the Spokane Inland Empire units were standalone. They were unitized body locomotives, which generally would be the wave of the future. The rest were semi-permanently coupled dual units. So it's really kind of like joining two locomotives in one. They were actually semi-independent. They really could have been run, a little bit of work could have been run independently. The Great Northerns were not technically independent, but they were always run 3 or 4 at a time. One place the 1010 is unique among all these is that it was, again, a hybrid. That theme again. The 1010 was designed for the beginning with a remarkable feature. 2 run modes under motorman control. Freight mode, where starting pulling effort is maximized and high speed's not the interest. And passenger mode, which is the inverse, not powerful starting effort, but high speed. By the way, it's not known what the NE's plans were for a fast passenger locomotive since most of their cars were motorized. Maybe they foresaw a truly long-distance passenger service eventually. Anyway, it also occasioned industry comments that some of the electrical controls had a kind of a newfangled quality. They were push button. Yeah. The 1010 was unique in another way, and we got to be cautious because detailed plans and interior photos and the locomotives themselves were not always preserved, and unfortunately, the 1010 did not survive. But the number comparisons are unfair because the 1010 was not only a locomotive. The theme of experimental hybridism continues. Edwards and the Mulberry Boys had the idea of pushing by design all the driving motors and ventilation fans and control apparatus and whatnot down to the low level of the wheels. They were completely outside of the cab. Usually engines were just kind of, the motorman or whoever was crammed up in the front, and everything, there was rotary converters if it was AC, or there was all kinds of apparatus there, but there was just nothing there. So if we could be transported back inside the 1010, we wouldn't be crowded by transformers and equipment and the like. We would find clear space, end to end, like a long baggage car, but with motorman's controls on either end. And the open space would and was used to transport all kinds of things. The 1010 proved itself in passenger and freight service, and indeed served on at least one branch as an opening day ornament. So I just got a couple of photos that I want to look at with you without too much unnecessary comment. I really love that one. That's probably a test run or something. It's a fairly decently long freight line. Don't know what was being carried there, but I like seeing it in action, even if it was posed. It said that sometimes ladies like a beast, so there you go. Got one more? There we go. There it is on the day that it was rolled out of the shops, and that's all the people who built it and designed it and whatnot. And right here, in the light hat, there's J. Paulding Edwards. There. Fortunately, I probably could figure out eventually, but I don't know the names of anybody else there. But it'd be nice to really learn about their careers. You know, even the folks who did the most basic things, and kind of see how long they stayed and that sort of thing. Like what role it played in kind of the long-term economy of Chico. Okay. So the Beast operated in its original form until 1930, when it was deemed too large, and rather than scrapping, the Sacramento Northern, successor railroad, practiced the art of recycling. It was cut down. Is that it? Oops, nope, wrong pick. There we go. That's better. It was cut to a 38-foot freight engine with express passenger function, retired, and it served until 1954. 43 years in service, continuous. It was scrapped, and there's nothing left but plans and pictures and maybe some memories. But this is Chico's freshest, oldest claim to fame. Let's see what else we got. I will continue the research on the 1010, and we're helped here by engineer Edwards, for he wrote a very thorough technical paper on the 1010 for the Electric Railway Journal. It contains specifications good enough to rebuild by, if we so choose ever. So if any Henry Butters are out there looking for a tax deduction, talk to me afterwards. More seriously, we learn a lot about Edwards and the Northern Electric from his paper, and I will be reprinting it and giving a copy to the museum. But let me highlight just one point that I just savor. Let's see what we get here. There it is again. The 1010 was built up from heavy steel I-beams, and one would think that, you know, you lay your I-beam so, and then for the surface maybe a steel plate on top and maybe some wood perpendicular to the I-beam. But Edwards specifies double flooring of tongue and grooves, probably nice wood from Diamond Match, with quieting felt in between, and with the wood just gently offset, just a little bit from the perpendicular to the beam, so that the weight is kind of transported down at an angle and kind of avoids linear stress. It's a fine point, but it's typical of the care that we saw. Also, the paper dwells quite lovingly on how the locomotive was painted. So there it is, and there, oops, anyway, imagine that picture of the locomotive with all the guys. There they are on, you know, graduation day. The company had a number of other electric locomotives, of course, and some bought ready-made, some also built in Chico, including a baby sister of the 1010. By comparison, really a tiny. It was 37 feet long, but the 1010 was the star, like its builder. So there's a long 1910 engineering profile of the line for the Journal of Electricity, Power, and Gas, and Edwards doubtless assisted. And they noted the use of portable, movable on the rails substations. Those were used before. They weren't invented here, but they were cutting edge and typical of the line's problem-solving flexibility. A 1907 industry publication held that these movable substations were at the highest voltage of any in the world, 60,000 volts AC. And those two were Chico built. So Mr. Edwards remained with the Northern Electric for a decade, and with bankruptcy came the necessary house cleaning. He was retained as consulting engineer for a while and would be in the newspapers starting the next few years building race cars, then motorboat races, and one of his held the world speed record at 45 miles an hour back then. Then there were hydroplanes that he designed and built. His tie to Chico endured. Not only did he keep living here years after Henry Butters' sudden death at the age of 58 in 1908, and not only did he buy one of the Bidwell lots on Big Chico Creek, he purchased the 600-acre-plus Rowe Ranch near Honcut, and with other Northern Electric officials started a firm to sell Thermalito, olive, and citrus properties. Okay? These men believed in the area and what they were doing, and they put their money, so to speak, where their work was. It's time to move on, but there's more I want to say about Mr. Edwards carefully. Let's see if I can get a picture of him there. There's something like this. We who look into history see the rise and fall, and sometimes rise again, of ventures and ideas and lives. I wish I could tell you that he lived a joyful life and went on to ever higher achievements to the end. I can't. Let the agonies of the past abide for now. Our present age is hooked on the quick stimulus. So let me just say that after the Northern Electric, something progressively went off for him. Whether it was the road's eventual bankruptcy about 6 years after his dad died, with his mom dying less than 8 months later. After the railroad, news reports of new business plans with a bright, spectacular quality. Then little afterward. Until the next one. He came up with great ideas, and sometimes they hit. He offered 152 3- and 4-seater electric carts for visitors to the 1915 San Francisco Panama Pacific International Exposition. He made a fortune quickly. He leaped on the possibilities of aviation, building planes and establishing San Carlos's airfield on the peninsula. He urgently maintained that flyers had to be trained because the future war would be in the air. Visionary. In his success, he promoted the oceanside amusement pavilions of Seal Beach down in Orange County. But apart from this last, nothing took hold. A few years later, newspaper's story told of a man who came into one town, I think it was in Colorado, and he was elected president of the Chamber of Commerce almost immediately on force of personality and charisma alone. And their ventures started. Then misunderstandings that bills had to be paid before he did something with the receipts. Now I say all this only because there's a poignant confirmation of how much Chico and the Northern Electric had meant to him. Just I have to say, in my non-professional judgment, he had an untreated progressive mental illness, probably in the manic neighborhood. And in reading through more than 800 newspaper accounts of him, I don't see that he was bad or trying to be bad. I think that inside him, he was still a man of great ability and ambition, but he couldn't fully contact the outside world to make his visions real. So it was in 1927 that newspapers all through our valley, including Chico, reported that a man was at the airfields with exciting plans for a network of airplanes coming soon to Chico and elsewhere. Nothing came of it. It was only a vision, but it was a good vision. And it has rather a familiar ring, a high-speed transport network from Los Angeles to Redding to benefit Chico and the valley entire. In the vast confusion, he didn't forget us. So it's time to say goodbye. He went on dreaming great dreams and admittedly causing no little chaos until the mid-1930s or so. I hope he found some peace and some care. He died quietly in 1941. The Northern Electric would go through its time of trouble too before it transformed and found its way. And our companion through this clutch of stories is a third unsung hero. Along this way, we'll say hello again to Henry Butters and then goodbye. The interurban age saw astonishing growth until about 1916, but the financial returns were not impressive. There was one systemic issue all over. Overblown revenue estimates and overblown revenue estimates and lowballed expense estimates. Basic business problem. Almost no interurban was immune. It wasn't just the Northern Electric, it was really all of them. It was a new field. Its benefits were obvious and dramatic, as with hitting 60 miles an hour getting out to Oroville, but maintenance was always more than had been projected in the palmy planning days. Look at that, there's some real damage. It's the rails just going down into nothing. The Northern Electric, for all its innovation, was straight down the main line there. Our blessed and blessing alluvial plains meant a great deal of water down from the mountains and hills, less controlled than now, and the railroad had a horrifying number of washouts starting early on, even before the line to Sacramento was finished. Service was interrupted far too often, and infrastructure sometimes had to be rebuilt from scratch, at times from the roadway on up, not accepting bridges. And there were also two negative contingencies at the start, the earthquake of '06 and the national panic of 1907. The quake threw West Coast capital flows into disarray with heavy losses, contraction of bank risk-taking and all, and the panic of 1907 from an unsuccessful attempt in New York to corner the market in F. Augustus Heinz's Montana-based United Copper, which led to further disarray and market pullbacks. The Northern Electric had been an integrated plan. The ultimate aim had been to provide electric passenger and freight service networking the valley. There was to have been the Eastern Main Line going through Chico, and a second main line at the western edge of the valley, and east-west branches connecting them like ladder roads. There were to be branches going east to Susanville, and northward the line was due up to via Red Bluff up to Reading, and westward to build, most importantly, down to the bay to Company Wharves at Vallejo. This would have enabled the Northern Electric to compete with any of the big railroads and possible interurban upstarts, too. Nothing got done north of Chico. The Western Main Line stumbled getting started. Branches off the main line were built. You've got Calusa there. That's Vallejo. First train out of Calusa. And all that happened, you know, the Calusa, the Woodland, they operated, some profitably, others not so much. I have to add that J. Paulding's 1927 vision of the airlines exactly transposed the Northern Electric plan. He just made it into airplanes. So Butters and Edwards and the others, you know, they aimed big. They tried, but they began the race with 3 hammer blows in succession. The full picture was not executed, and the cash flow and economies of scale didn't materialize. It was a magnificent plan. You know, had it succeeded, if we could have gotten to Vallejo and Reading and done the Western Main Line and the ladders and all of that, oops, the history of the valley and perhaps California transport would have been greatly different. After the 1907 panic, we meet Henry Butters again, going all in, this time to save the system, so much so that he wanted to put his family's entire fortune into it, including property he had deeded to Mrs. Butters as her sole and separate. So much so that his wife, her husband's equal in willpower, put her foot down, causing an estrangement, doubtless heartbreaking to them both. The crisis of the Northern Electric weighed heavily on Henry Butters. He thought of it and did little else but try to save his vision. And when he died in 1908, he was still estranged from his wife and all consumed. His brother would write years later that he had given his life to the Northern Electric. His vision lasted, and men and families involved at the beginning, E.R. Lilienthal, Louis Schloss, Eugene de Salba, and his family, perhaps most of all, contributed large amounts of personal cash. They continued to press on, branches got done, but before long the stumbled Vallejo connection was out of date because the Oakland, Antioch, and Eastern, a new interurban from the bay up, let's see what we get here, it's pretty. Yeah. With a very steep grade going into the Oakland Hills, and finally a 3,700-foot tunnel right through the Oakland Hills and then to Sacramento, completed first and beat their action. It was too much. Maintenance on the Northern Electric